All right, hello everybody. This is Andrew Himes, and I'm the Director of Collective Impact for the Carbon Leadership Forum. And you've arrived at a meeting of the NGO and Government Roundtable on Embodied Carbon. We have four basic objectives for this call, which have been the same objectives over the last, my goodness, it's been 6 years since we started this gathering. And in the very first meeting, I think we had about five or six organizations participate, and now we've got a lot more that have joined the NGO Roundtable and had to turn it into the NGO Government Roundtable because of a number of government agencies at various levels joining as well. Our objectives are to share news, strategic plans, resources, and tools related to embodied carbon, to report planning and future dates for conferences, webinars, and meetings, to inspire and facilitate ongoing communication and conversation among key leaders related to embodied carbon, and finally, to encourage convergence on shared embodied carbon terminology, data standards, benchmarks, and targets for embodied carbon reduction. And with that as kind of an intro, I'm while I'm going through my list here, um, one of the people on this call is Michelle Lambert, also from the Carbon Leadership Forum. Michelle, I wonder, could you give us a really quick report on the status of the ECHO project? And first of all, tell us what the ECHO project is, and then I know that the project team members, the organizations and team members had a meeting a couple of days ago. So if you just give us a kind of a quick update on that.
Hi, sure, no problem. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I think Megan Lewis also might be joining and give a little bit more detail on one of the publications, but happy to just kind of give a status update on the ECHO project, which stands for Embodied Carbon Harmonization and Optimization. And I can put the link for that project website in the chat afterwards. But it is a convening of 17 different organizations that are all either collecting embodied carbon data or preparing to collect embodied carbon data on projects. And one thing that is unique about the ECHO project is that we define project as not just buildings, but we also are inclusive of landscape and infrastructure and working to align the embodied carbon data collection and reporting across all of those different components of a project. And the ECHO project the group has been meeting for a little over 2 years now, and in the fall released the first two publications that came out of this consensus group. One is a data schema for collecting embodied carbon data across projects. And there is a white paper and a downloadable Excel spreadsheet of data fields for embodied carbon data collecting. And then the second is an LCA recommendations report, and which essentially looks at a whole number of different current existing LCA standards and policies and certification systems, and looked at all of the different characteristics and collection fields that they are currently using, did a comparison, and came out with a number of consensus recommendations across all these different organizations as part of the ECHO group, sort of as a current state of the practice of LCA, next level recommendations, and then future recommendations for where we all hope that LCA goes at that point. And then we are, so like I said, we're entering the third year of the ECHO group convening and are in the process of doing some strategy planning and priorities for 2025 to determine what might come next out of this work. I think I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle. And I'm going to be going a little bit out of the order that I originally had set because I've got a few people who haven't showed up, but a number of people are here who are a little bit further down on the list. So, um, Michaela, would you mind going next, please, first? And I'll go ahead and And I'll be rejiggering my agenda here while you speak, and you're saving my life, as a matter of fact.
Wonderful. Hmm.
And Michaela, of course, represents building transparency, which you all know about, I think, and I'll let her do any other introduction to her work that she'd like to do.
Sure. I have just a few slides. Thanks for having me. I think this is my first roundtable. So, yeah, my name's Michaela DeRusso. I'm the Senior Data and Methodology Manager with Building Transparency. Just wanted to, just in case there's anybody on the call who isn't familiar with what we work on, we're a nonprofit, and our core mission is to provide open access data and tools for enabling decarbonization of the built environment. And with that, we're the owners and operators of the EC3 tool, Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator, and some of the main kind of functionalities that folks are used to working with the EC3 tool is our, kind of fundamental public data set of environmental product declarations for construction materials, and also the plan and compare buildings, so like project planner feature of EC3. So just wanted to start there, and just wanted to provide an update on kind of the latest stats in EC3. We're up to over 150,000 EPDs in the database, from over 2,600 companies. And one thing we're proud of is the development of, we've got over 200 material categories for things that are used in buildings, construction, infrastructure. And you can kind of see this cool ramp up over time of the EPDs housed in EC3 since our launch in 2019. But getting to kind of new stuff. Um, so we've implemented a civil engineering planner in EC3, which is it's like a sister or parallel functionality to plan and compare buildings, which folks may be interested in. Currently, if folks are interested in testing out this feature, you've got to go to your account settings to turn on. It's like a toggle button. So um, if it's just your normal account, you won't see my plan and compare civil engineering, but you can turn it on, or you can email me if you're struggling to find it in your account settings. It'll just be on your main account page. Anyway, so it's got the same format, but we've implemented, um, fields and features that are more relevant to infrastructure projects, and we're definitely looking for additional folks to kind of test run that. So you can see project type is slightly different than buildings and other fields like that. All this one is not brand new, but it's on the new side. So we've got, and folks still are testing it out for us. So we've implemented a maps feature in EC3, where if you conduct a search in find and compare materials, you can actually then convert the list of EPDs that you've gotten to looking at it from a map point of view. And if you click on, any of the plants that were identified for this list of EPDs that were pulled up, then you can kind of click on the plant and find out some more additional information about that plant. So, the number of EPDs that are produced from that plant that match your search, and the GWP range of the materials that are found. So that's kind of exciting. Also wanted to announce for anyone interested in this from this group that we've launched a single user pilot account option for folks. And it's so if for example, a entire company didn't want to partner with us for getting kind of from public access to pilot access, that individual users, if they wanted, could sign up and have some of these features enabled to them just individually. So you get access to pilot features and product categories that are in development at the pilot stage for testing and use, and that's prior to them becoming publicly available. We have a quarterly meeting for office hours where you can ask questions and provide feedback. You can also learn about newly released and upcoming pilot categories and features early on. And then we're kind of hoping that this is like a circular thing where we also get feedback from some of these super users of the tool so that we can kind of, prioritize improvements and other functionality in the tool. So you can email me, or you can go learn more at this link. I can put that in the chat in a second if you're interested. And then lastly, to not take too much time, I just wanted to mention some of the ways we're pretty heavily involved in both kind of the embodied carbon policy level and EPD standards level. So some examples of this, we've been providing support on New York State and New York City's executive orders related to embodied carbon tracking for state and city projects. We're also heavily involved in the product category rule landscape right now. In the sense that we really want to facilitate high quality data, EPD data being produced at the source. And we think PCRs are the way to do that. So we're involved in the cement, concrete masonry, asphalt binder, and steel PCRs that are being updated right now, and have some visibility into that. And then lastly, we also are pretty involved heavily at the PCR and EPD guidance level. A lot of this is happening at the American Center for Life Cycle Assessment, another friendly nonprofit in this world and space. And so we're pretty involved in some of these nitty-gritty EPD detail working groups. So I'll just stop there. And thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Michaela. Lots of excitement happening in your world right now, I think. And a lot of that excitement is tied in with or connected with other significant organizations, including the Carbon Leadership Forum. So we're really grateful for your partnership. And I'll just mention completely irrelevantly that here in Seattle, Stacy and Megan Lewis and I and Megan Byrne from CLF have just started sharing an actual physical office space. So it's
Yeah, that's a good update. I forgot
really,
that one.
really exciting. We'll get to have lunch and coffee and hurl paper things at each other during the day. All right, so let's first of all, next, of course, then Melanie DeCole from AIA. Would you please tell us what AIA is up to and what's happening with the DDX platform, especially?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Let me get set up here and I'll share some slides. So I've attended a few roundtables in the past, but this is sort of my first in this new role that I have as director of AIA's Climate Action Pledge programs. So let me share some slides here. All right. So yeah, we have been involved with the ECHO program for quite a while now, and have implemented some of the requirements into our DDX. Just within almost the last few months here, we have added an embodied carbon only section to the DDX, which is we're not requiring for reporting, but it is a way to go in and start adding in some data. And I'll show some updates of what that actually looks like. This is the first time we've sort of parsed it out as a separate journey. There are also embodied carbon ways to input some data in the main whole building journey, which is what most architects use when they're reporting. So this is kind of the first step. We added in some unconditioned space because previously we had not covered that. We get a lot of questions actually about parking garages and what to do with that kind of space. So now there's a way for us to respond to that and say, if you want to start tracking your embodied carbon, that's a way to account for some of this. So you can mix conditioned and unconditioned space together. This is brand new as of the last couple of weeks as we're trying to lock down our changes. Is showing your GWP and intensity as well. Noting the lack of commas here makes it a little bit confusing to see, but the data can be added in, and the system will do a square footage to square meter conversion in the back end, so you don't have to worry about any of that. And as I said, this is kind of the next step towards building this into requiring some of this data in the future. This is what the actual input page looks like. If you have a DDX account, I'd say go in and try the embodied carbon only journey, see what you can find out. All the data will be saved for you for future. If you want to come back and update it at any point, but you can add in your stages and your scopes, and these are all kind of in alignment with the ECHO requirements. And there's equipment and furnishings as well. And then I didn't show the whole screen, but there is also the biogenic carbon portion that you can enter in. So going into the reports, so we put out 2 reports every year. The 2030 by the numbers, I don't know why it's auto advancing, is been going on for quite a while. But we also have a new materials by the numbers, and just pointing out some of the embodied carbon graphs that or some of the data that we track. And our project count is going up quite a bit, although the square footage didn't increase that much, but we're getting more and more and more projects in, which is interesting to see, and we expect that will continue. Just put in another one by scope. Interesting to see that interiors is over here, the highest category, followed by superstructure, substructure, enclosure. So this is really well, I guess besides the embodied carbon only journey, is my announcement is that last year we did our first ever materials pledge. Come on, stop auto advancing. We did our first ever materials pledge report that came out. You can check it out. We don't have embodied carbon data in it from the previous year. We will have a question that aligns with ECHO for this upcoming year. So that will be something new that will be featured when the report comes out in the fall. But this is the kind of data that we're collecting now, trying to understand how architects are organizing their materials libraries, how much knowledge they have within their firm, within different impact areas of the materials pledge. And then, as I said, this year we'll be adding some embodied carbon data as well. And I will put some links in the chat to some of these reports so you can check them out. And I put my email in the chat already, and happy to talk more about it.
Great. Thanks so much, Melanie. And Melanie, would you remind us, when was the first announcement of the materials pledge?
You mean in terms of reporting or actual?
The original pledge, when did that take place?
So from what I understand, 2018 was the first time they actually started doing some data reporting. It's fairly new. I have a whole slide with the history of it, but that's somebody on this call might actually know better, but that's the date that sticks in my mind.
I've seen a letter from AIA architects in 2017, so that's probably what I have in mind could be near what you're saying, Melanie.
Right. That's what I thought, which feels to me like this announcement, Melanie, from you today is really significant. That is, there's been there was the original pledge, the very first attempts to collect data, and now a report on that more comprehensive data is really significant. It's kind of turning a great promise into a really important reality. So thank you for telling us about that, especially.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so Mick Patterson has joined us from Facade Tectonics Institute. And Mick, would you please tell us what FTI is up to these days?
Yeah, so we are focused right now we're just about to go live with our 2025 Vitruvian Honors and Awards program. We've got 13 categories, 4 new categories this year. And we've got new categories are facade educator and let's see what else. We have a new student award. And it's a pretty good, these are all facade focused awards, and it's really all about recognizing the people that are making things happen in this really important area, with the facade as a focal point for sort of the um, leveraging the facade system as an opportunity to move buildings towards these goals of resilience and sustainability, because it's the conflux of all of these different considerations that impact these considerations of resilience and sustainability. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that. That's what we're focused on. And we're also getting ready to release our call for papers in April of this year for the 2026 World Congress. And we've been invited by Carnegie Mellon University. They're going to host the World Congress in 2026. So we have ongoing conversations with them, and it's going to be, they're really leaning into it. They want to help us manage the peer review process for the papers, and they've got great facilities for the World Congress and this kind of thing. We're continuing on, we did a grant project with the DOE last year, which involved a lot of survey work with architects and other constituents in the building industry about barriers to adopting new technology, which is sitting on the shelf, not being used, higher performing technology, which the DOE found very valuable, and we're continuing that exercise into 2025. We've got sort of new tasks that we've worked out with them. And our advocacy committee continues to work with the various code agencies. We had a lot of success last year in moving these performance requirements in the codes, facade related requirements forward, towards higher specifications. So there's a lot of stuff going on at the Institute.
Great. Thank you so much, Mick. And delighted to see you here. Next, I'd like to call on Natalie Georgiev from the Center for Sustainable Building Research in Minnesota, at the University of Minnesota. And I know that you've got a lot of really interesting things going on with Minnesota ByClean. So take it away, please.
Great, thanks. So my name's Natalie Georgiev. I'm with the Center for Sustainable Building Research at the University of Minnesota, and we are working very closely with the Minnesota Department of Administration and the Department of Transportation on implementing Minnesota's ByClean policy, which some of you may know was signed by Governor Walz in August 2023, and then out of that rolled out the ByClean Task Force in October of 2023. We do have a lot going on this past summer, 2024. The task force broke out into sub-working groups for concrete, steel and rebar, asphalt, our pilot program, which launched in July of last year and is coming to a conclusion. And we'll be providing information on that in our upcoming legislative report due in December of this year. As well as recommendations and research that the subgroups put together on other materials that might be added to the policy in the future. As I mentioned, eligible materials under this policy are including carbon steel rebar, structural steel, concrete, asphalt paving mixtures, and then potentially some others such as glass, insulation, things like that we're compiling research on. And making recommendations. We'll, starting in December, we'll submit our first legislative report, and then we'll have annual recommendations and reports due thereafter until 2029. And in January 15th, 2026, after our first legislative report, the commissioner will review the report and then set limits for concrete used in buildings. And then in 2028, January 2028, that's when the rest of the GWP limits should be set for rebar, structural steel, concrete for roadway projects, asphalt, and any other materials that the task force recommends. What else are we doing? Our last meeting was in December as a task force, and I'll post the link to the website after this. And our last meeting was about our pilot program, where we looked at some buildings projects, I believe 7 of them, several concrete paving projects, and several asphalt paving projects, and kind of compiled our recommendations and conclusions from that. And all of our meeting presentation slides and meeting notes are on the website there if you want to check that out. As of December 4th, we launched our EPD grant program. So I think we've got $255,000 from the Department of Admin and $310,000 from MnDOT going towards creating EPDs in Minnesota for eligible materials. And so that's coming up. We're getting applications in the next couple of weeks, and we'll review them and then post who the grantees are. And then I guess our next meeting in March is kind of when we'll be compiling all of the recommendations and perspectives and technical aspects from all the working groups and from the larger task force group as we kind of go through our draft of what recommendations might look like for these different materials. And I guess I didn't mention eligible projects under the policy in case folks are curious. It's for buildings, state buildings larger than 50,000 gross square feet or renovation of 50,000 square feet of occupied or conditioned space. And then new construction or reconstruction of 2 or more lane miles of a trunk highway. I'll post a link to the task force website and also my email in case anyone wants to get in contact, because kind of next steps are also researching database options for when we start collecting EPDs, how we're going to store that data. So especially if anyone's involved, we did meet with a few other Buy Clean policy states and programs. But if you have any information or want to get in contact, I'll post my email in the chat. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. And kind of an appropriate follow-up to your report on Buy Clean in Minnesota, Megan Lewis is on the line. And Megan, I'm from our Carbon Leadership Forum staff. And I know that you're going to be talking about ECHO recommendations for alignment on Project LCA requirements. But Megan, would you mind also telling us a little bit about a couple of Buy Clean related reports that we're releasing or we have released in December, and also just make a note of the video series?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think I see Hannah today. I know she sometimes joins. So happy to share the newsletter that just went out this morning. And for whatever reason, my internet is not pulling up the page, or I would show them. But 2 really exciting resources. One is model LCA specifications for all, not for all, but a majority of concrete, steel, and wood structural engineering products. So everything that would need to comply with Buy Clean, Buy Fair Washington, but is very relevant outside of Washington State. And then a 5-part training video series of 5 really great, short, but in-depth on Embodied Carbon 101, LCA, EPDs, whole building LCA, and Embodied Carbon policy. Highly recommend. There was a lot of our staff contributed in some way to these videos, and they are, oh, thanks. And again, they were developed, Andrew, I think you said this, they were developed in collaboration with Washington Department of Commerce to support implementation of their Washington Buy Clean, Buy Fair program, but are really relevant for all states, and were developed with the hope of them being able to be used in other states that are working on Buy Clean, or by private sector projects who just want to use the model specifications, for example. So you want me to go ahead and share the Project LCA requirements work as well? Okay.
If you wouldn't mind, I don't see Jordan on the call this morning.
Yeah. Okay. So I was going to share that ECHO update now. Does that work?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just quickly pull up my screen. So I believe Michelle already gave a little bit of an echo update. This is just the latest publication that came out in September. It's right there in front of my face at the end of September, but we haven't had a chance to share it on the call. So this is one of two publications that ECHO worked together across 2024 and even part of 2023, and then finalized over the summer. So this one focuses on recommendations for 10 key areas of Project LCA to encourage alignment across different standards and programs, starting with the target audience of ECHO organizations, so the commitment programs and certifications that are a part of ECHO, but we realize these are also broadly interesting to anyone who sets requirements for Project LCA. The recommendations have they're set up with a sort of three-tiered structure of absolute minimum, which really, I think, and this is all this is written in the short white paper. It's really accessible. Recommend finding it on the ECHO website. But the absolute minimum sort of reflects this is already happening across the standards and programs we looked at. Strongly recommended is where we feel like current best practices. And then future considerations were one that the working group either couldn't yet come to alignment on or felt like the data wasn't there yet to advocate for it being strongly recommended as a widespread best practice. And so these recommendations really aim to balance the rapid progress that we need with the different needs of the many programs and stakeholders and goals that are represented within ECHO, and then also the embodied carbon space more broadly. The appendix, which is one of my favorite parts of this report, has comparisons of the 29, or we looked at more than 30, but focused on 29 major standards, policies, and programs that are relevant in the North American context. So we do include some global ones, but they're mostly North American focused. Included a link here. If you want to see a similar European analysis, Ramble had a white paper a year or two ago that did a similar sort of thing, focusing on what are the different Project LCA requirements that we're seeing in standards and policies and certifications and commitment programs. So you can see here sort of what the an example of one of the figures. And I think, and here again is the list of the programs we looked at as the working group was thinking about. Again, these did not set exactly what the three tiers of recommendations were, but were really informative in helping us understand where are standards and programs today, where is sort of best practice, and then where are things headed. So I think with that, I'll share, or I think I'll stop sharing, and I will put the link to where you can find that publication in the chat.
Great. Thank you so much. And Megan, would you mind giving us an extremely short report on the Junebug project?
My 2.5-year-old.
Yeah.
She is at daycare, I'm happy to report, Andrew, safely in the hands of some excellent teachers. That's the current report.
Fantastic. Now we're all up to speed on the most important questions, I think. And Cecilia Wandiga from the Center for Science and Technology Innovations, CSTI, in our partner continent over there in Africa. And please tell us about, I think you've got a new report called Blending the Old and New Africa and Net Zero. Can you talk a little bit about that and what else is happening in your part of the world?
Yes, and a preview before I explain what we do and who we are. We're not building sector professionals. We're research, especially environmental research and chemical technology. So when we come at this, we're helping building professionals, but we're not thinking like building professionals. A little bit of background about us: we come from the UNESCO side, and we're looking at what we're also looking at is the impact of the built environment in natural ecosystems. And these statistics you know, so I'll rush through this because I want to give you something different at the end. And how do we now look at all these issues in the context of not only African construction, but also African biodiversity systems? And in the US and frameworks like, yes, the federal government says something, but it's typically not as prescriptive. what African countries tend to follow a lot like Asia, where the national government prescribes. So we found this, and I'll share the link later. This Malaysia has an ISG model, and it takes you through everything, not only how to align the buildings, but the manufacturing and the industry, and put everything together. So then you can make sure that you're all hitting those targets. So we're looking at it from that perspective. Again, we have a chemistry hub. Eco-chemistry means chemistry focused on ecological impacts. And on the private sector side, we've assembled front leaders. Jim is here. He's James Kitchen from Mass. He's one of our advisory consortium members. We have 14 Trees. They do 3D printed construction. We have ARUP, Africa Wildlife Foundation, and some of the other SMEs. So this is something that we presented for investor purposes, but what we're being asked for, of course, is this movement towards net zero is new. So everybody's asking, there's all this money being mobilized for regular building construction and infrastructure. So why should they then look at, in terms of this 130 to 170 billion in critical infrastructure? What's so big? What's the big deal about doing embodied carbon in that? Why can't we just build faster? Given that they're understanding that there's, some of the technology is not ready, there's not necessarily best practices global or tested in the African continent. And so there's a lot of hesitation from the investor side. So this is our answer to them, that you have to do you're going to have to hit these things, whether you do the regular or whether you do the embodied carbon. Yes, we want job creation, but you have to think about the reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You're going to have to think about the biodiversity impact, and you're going to figure out how to not just plop infrastructure projects on communities, but how to engage the communities, which have various skill levels and a lot not being professionally skilled, into the planning and design process. So here you see the teams that we have and the members that we have on our lead. ACWA, they do digital platforms for citizen science monitoring. And iCrete, it's a local company. They're making temperature sensors for concrete maturity indices. Because what we're realizing is when you have we have informal sector workers, which is a large, probably about 80% of the construction sector, and then we have the formal. So the knowledge on sort of eyeballing concrete mixes with different skill levels leads to a lot of issues and building collapses or improper. So by putting in this simple concrete sensor and getting the concrete maturity index, what iCrete is discovering is that a lot of times, first of all, even for the professionals, we're discovering that most of the specifications that are Western based are overprescribing the amount of cement needed for local applications. So one way of potentially saving is to be able to look at that. Another part that we're discovering is also the mixes are wrong. And we have several climatic zones in one country. So we're now beginning to try it, and with iCrete help them look at how do we now optimize the different concrete systems for not just our humidity, but our different climatic zones. This is the part that probably will interest you more is because of the charcoal, we're looking at charcoal being the main source of energy. We're looking at biochar cement and biochar building products. So we'll start with simple things like cladding. We're testing sidewalks, and I'll give you a little bit of a preview. And then we're going to look at, then before we actually get into the cement, we can look at concrete aggregates. How much biochar can we replace sand with? Reason being that we have a lot of illegal sand harvesting. And if I show you the pictures on that, it would be a big horror story. So, and then looking at water treatment or putting it in pavements and seeing if we can capture some of the transportation oil runoff. So it's not yet LCA, it's not yet all of this looking at the specific embodied carbon measures. But the reason we're starting here is the investors are very worried, of course, about feedstock supply. And of course, when you put something that is used for agriculture in the context of the construction sector, you go from using kilograms to gigatons. And so the first thing that the construction investors are worried about is, given that there are all these competing unit uses, you can use biochar for energy, you can use biochar for agriculture, will you have enough for these types of applications? So to show you then what it looks like, just real quick. Oops. So this is a partner. They actually make biochar. They make the kilns, which we call GCOs, and they also make the biochar. They use mostly acacia trees, but they also make biochar from invasive species. So here was their own, they did it at a campsite. So they wanted to see, this was before we got in touch with them in terms of what would happen if you were actually doing it for a foundation of something that carries weight. And of course, that's a rainwater harvesting tank. So they mix the biochar cement with that ratio. On this one, I think they did about 20% mix of biochar. And that's what it looks like on the ground. This is what I was telling you about informal, these workers there, it's more like an apprenticeship model. So what I'm talking about when I say eyeball mixing, that's how we do it. And that's the majority of the skilled labor. These, of course, are trained, but not necessarily professional. And then you get to see about 8 months later, some zooming in, and I'll put the video. It still looks pretty good, and it's got some nice little charcoal specks in there. What we're learning is also to the discussion about the type of size that we need for the biochar and the specification. So there's a local company called Bamburi Cement, and they're giving us the specification. So we gave them a 50 kilogram sample of to their specification. So now we're actually testing it with them and road construction crew to try and see what will happen. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Cecilia. That was actually an inspiring report. I really appreciate the range of your report and the way that CSDI and your partners are balancing a whole set of things, including embodied carbon, but also social equity and addressing climate change, and how do you create sustainable communities and sustainable and thriving businesses as well. So that was really exciting. And our next speaker actually is James Kitchen from Mass Design, and you're appropriate partly because I know that your organization is engaged with CSTI and the work in Kenya, but also because I think that you've got a report on on a bio-based materials collective and agricultural fibers (PCR), and we'd love to hear about that PCR.
Thank you very much. Yep, great to hear from Cecilia and see her work as well. Reminds me how cool my job is. So first update is agricultural PCRs or agricultural fiber PCRs is being developed by Smart EPD. So Anna Lasso is doing a great job of like corralling some folks and helping us develop a PCR, and it's being funded by Casper. A lot of people on that committee that you might know, like Katie Poss and Jordan Palmieri and Stephanie Carlisle and Chris Magwood, etc. But also lots of representation from hemp and straw and grass and bamboo industries. So I think last week we kind of had a breakthrough and made some agreement between all of these different fibers, which was pretty exciting. And the next step is to start looking at land use impacts and the how agricultural practices influence those impacts. As for another update, the Bio-Based Materials Collective is now like a 375 person active like volunteer group. Feel free to message me and join that if you want the updates. We've got our next quarterly meeting on the 22nd of January, and we also have an in-person summit coming up in May 13th. So that'll be somewhere in the Northeast, I think. But that's if anything, just a really excellent like networking group, very active. Lots of people willing to share their knowledge, which is amazing around bio-based materials. And as for a third update, we're also been invited to host the pre-summit for the Living Futures conference, which is in I think in Portland this year in May sometime as well. So if you're on the other side of the country then it's that might be more convenient if you want to come to the Living Futures conference too. Thanks.
Great. Thanks so much, James. And next on my list, I've got Brad Neese from the GSA, and I think you've got something to tell us about the IRA, the low embodied carbon materials component of the IRA, and crucial questions facing you all, and work that you're doing that's really important. I'm really glad to see that it's ongoing.
Yes, happy to provide an ongoing update of the work that GSA is doing in the BioClean space. So over the past 3 years, we've invested, of course, billions of dollars in climate infrastructure projects through basically 2 laws, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. And both of these pieces of legislation have really been key. These laws have been the largest sustainability and infrastructure investments in the U.S. To date. They provided $7 billion for GSA to do our work in undertaking impactful job-creating infrastructure projects, fostering innovation, economic growth, and national security for the American people by the American people. So some of the things, energy saving improvements, for example, at the Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center in DC, these are 2 projects that have been funded by these. We're constructing a brand new commercial border station in Douglas, Arizona. And these investments are helping us build a stronger, healthier, more prosperous community in 49 different states. That's who's got this investment from coast to coast, 49 different states. And combined, these projects that we've put together have supported 15,500 jobs across the U.S., $6 billion in labor income. It's represented 8.8 billion in our gross domestic product and 1.8 billion in tax revenue. So some examples closer to what we're talking about here, purchasing construction materials that are both competitive and high performance and lower environmental impact. The IRA, we've been catalyzing the growth of industries and jobs by demanding cleaner, more sustainable products. We're basically driving the market, and we continue to do that. And we have seen great response from the industries across the United States. So our low embodied carbon construction material program, which we've talked about here before, that's spurred development of almost 24,000 EPDs in the Inflation Reduction Act LEC product categories. That's asphalt, concrete, steel, and glass. Since the launch of our program in May 2023, there's been a steady increase in the number of US-made products with EPDs. Subsequent reductions, the amount of associated greenhouse gas emissions for those products. A couple of examples I want to share. There's, as I said, close to 24,000 new EPDs published in our material subcategories since May 2023. That's 151 different vendors that have published their first ever EPDs, putting us up now at 383 unique North American vendors that have published EPDs for GSA's glass, steel, concrete, or asphalt subcategories. It's an amazing amount of growth and innovation by the American businesses. The number of EPDs for concrete alone, those have increased by 19%. That's 18,000 EPDs since May of 2023. The flat glass manufacturers that meet our most stringent limits, that's the 20%, that's tripled since we began issuing our limits and asking for that as part of our solicitation. That really has increased the number of vendors that can participate in our federal procurements. So in addition to the embodied carbon avoidance, which is what we talk a lot about here in this session, we also anticipate that these investments from the IRA and the BIL, the Building Infrastructure Law, are going to save energy and reduce operational emissions. So we're looking at total carbon, and we're predicting that's about 2.3 million metric tons, which is about taking 500,000 gas-powered cars off the road for an entire year. And so one of the most comprehensive examples of that is the Moss U.S. Courthouse up in Salt Lake City. It's got $151 million going into this renovation project. 51 million of that is coming from the IRA. And what we're doing with that is we're replacing aging infrastructure. We're putting in innovative, more efficient mechanical equipment, the clean construction materials, also while addressing the seismic needs and structural deficiencies of a 118-year-old building, right? So a lot of our buildings are historic. So this project is going to accomplish many things at once. Like I said, it's one of the most holistic projects that we have. We've got a deep energy retrofit going on through that, which is typically done via an ESPC, and that's going to reduce the annual energy use by 52%. The LEC material numbers, we're looking at a 57% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of embodied carbon for the products selected there. We're putting in innovative technologies like chilled beams, high efficiency air handling units, electric boilers, water heaters, and we're going to reduce the consumption of the energy while increasing the comfort for the people using the building so they can accomplish their mission. Overall, this holistic project, it's going to meet the administration's federal building performance standard, which is going all electric and eliminating all on-site fossil fuel usage. And so we're very excited to get more projects holistically put together like that through these things. And that's the update I've got. I can post a link in if anybody wants to dive deeper into some of the statistics and stuff out there. I'll put that in the chat.
Fantastic, Brad. Thank you so much for that. And it's really great to hear about all the momentum. And I think momentum is an especially important word to think about right this minute, related to all of the work that you've been doing in the past few years. I just want to also point out, Kara Kokernak from ULI posted a couple of links in the chat window related to ULI's latest resource on embodied carbon. She describes it as an interactive timeline showcasing various intervention points for embodied carbon reduction. And the target audience is developers and business owners and so on. There's a link there, and we'll have her present at the next meeting of the forum as well. And then I'm going to call on somebody who isn't on my list, but who showed up, and I'm really glad that Luke Leung showed up. And Luke, could you please give us a quick report on what's happening with MEP 2040?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. There's a couple things happening. One is we are developing the MEP guide on embodied carbon, and that will be going out to publish soon. So look for that document. As you know, there are not a lot of MEP embodied carbon information out there, but this guide will cover that gap. That's number one. Number two is we are working closer with Architecture 2030 to help out on the administration side of it. The impact maybe to you all is if you today has an urge to donate money to MEP 2030, there's actually a way to do it now. So yeah, so if you have an urge to do that, feel free. That's it. Back to you, Andrew.
All right, I'll also mention that the embodied carbon report on MEP systems is being developed with cooperation and collaboration with the Carbon Leadership Forum technical staff, especially focused on policy, but also focused on the whole way that we understand what the contributions that MEP systems have to the overall carbon footprint of the project over its lifetime, And from CLF's point of view, we're extremely happy about being able to participate and support that project from MEP 2040. So the next person I'm going to be calling on now is Stephanie Dallo from the Zero Emissions Innovation Center in British Columbia. And Stephanie, tell us what is happening up in your part of the world. And also, you're also, I know, part of the Carbon Leadership Forum British Columbia Hub, which is hosted by ZEIC as well.
Yes. Thank you. I also prepared a few slides. Maybe it's not totally necessary to share, but that some visuals might help. Do I have sharing capability?
Now
Yes.
you do. You should. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, one second here. Yeah, so we have, can you see this? Hang on, let me just put that up there. And are you seeing just the actual slide now?
Just about to. I think it's just about to display. I've got a message that you have started screen sharing.
Yeah.
Maybe your connection to the internet is just a little bit slow.
Possibly. If you know what, if it takes too long, don't worry about it. This is really just an update to share what we've been doing.
Now it showed up. We can see your screen now. We can see it in presentation mode.
Okay, how about now? It's just like now is it in presentation mode?
Well, we're seeing your notes. Yeah, there it is. Perfect. Yeah. There's just a delay. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, yes, thanks. So yeah, we had a really great year in 2024, lots to celebrate. So we had held the second Embodied Carbon Awards, and we also had celebrated our 5-year anniversary. And I wrote an article that Megan had included in the last newsletter that had went out for CLF at the national level. So if you if you're interested in hearing kind of more breakdown, sharing what we had accomplished over the last 5 years, there's a lot of information there. But part of what we're continuing on with, this is a kind of I just was making the slide last minute, so it's not quite cleaned up yet, but I wanted to show you the Embodied Carbon Awards. We're continuing on with that. It's just been such a successful part of what we do at CLFBC, and bringing and celebrating the industry leaders, bringing them together, continuing to convene, and celebrating people who've demonstrated and organizations who've demonstrated organizational commitment to change, public sector leadership. Strengthening the practice is a category that an individual is nominated to. Large buildings and small building categories are project specific. And then we also have a commitment to circularity category. And of course, the circularity category, people will have to demonstrate how they are achieving embodied carbon reductions with those circular strategies. And so, yeah, that has been going really well. We're excited to be doing that again. It will be in May of this year. Some other, that's not a finished slide. We had some more case studies that we published this year, and we have a couple more that are going to be made live. And these are really helpful right now in supporting Vancouver in proposing their embodied carbon regulations for the 2025 Vancouver Building Bylaw updates. So a lot of work that's going to council for a vote to implement a 10% reduction to baseline. And there's some other caveats. There are some leadership credits that are being proposed that really can help drive the industry in starting to capture data related to LCA information related to MEP systems, interiors, also circular strategies, like if a project is deconstructed or if there's any design for disassembly, there are ways to acknowledge that as part of the embodied carbon requirements. And so I think there's some work that's happening there. We have this program within Zeek for it's called the Near Zero 2. It's about it's for Part 9 designer and builders who are reducing embodied carbon. It's a research grant or a research honorarium rather that is helping us collect data uh, on how things had gone on any large or smaller Part 9. We're actually trying to get some large Part 9 homes to apply, and we're accepting that until the end of this month. But this is helping to feed back into City of Vancouver when they start to then develop regulations to propose for the Part 9 world. I think I had also wanted to just show that one of the things that we're excited and that we're going to make sure to promote more so that it gets more exposure is a low carbon material sourcing guide. It's been also getting recognized. I will actually be meeting with someone, Rita from City of Seattle, who is interested in developing something similar. So it's just nice to see that this is just like the network of people that are exposed to this and wanting to just also work together and collaborate so that it's instead of duplicating efforts, we're sharing knowledge and sharing information. So the low carbon material sourcing guide is a list of low carbon materials mainly used for Part 9 buildings, but can be for Part 3 as well. But and their materials supplied and manufactured in BC. So that's being updated, and that's going to be something that we continue to try to get in front of designers and builders. And I think that was the main update, but some other things may be worth mentioning, and I can stop sharing there. But we are just seeing a lot of, speaking of momentum, Andrew, as you mentioned, and others mentioned, we've seen a lot of movement happening after we helped the Canadian Green Building Council organize a summit for embodied carbon across, and drawing Canadians across across our drawing experts across Canada to be involved in informing like what direction we're going, harmonizing the way that we create policies and capacity build, and just we're going to have another session. There's a white paper that's coming out of that. It's a little bit behind on schedule, but I think it's in the works. And then we're helping to organize another summit this year as part of the Building Lasting Change conference in June. So that will be exciting. Today I have to hop off after this actually, because I'm also in a session for Natural Resources Canada, NRCan. And it's about material passports. And so we're also making that relationship between embodied carbon data. Where does this material passport live? Another part of momentum that we're trying to keep on is with the circularity piece and really doing the work to demonstrate circular principles like deconstruction, reuse, design for disassembly as strategies for embodied carbon reduction. So there's just a lot of programming, trying to fill the gaps with data related that is missing, again, back to MEP systems and interiors, helping create resources, hopefully, potentially to support industry practitioners with specifications for low carbon materials. So there's a lot of stuff happening in motion that we're trying to achieve this year, and we'll pace ourselves and see what we don't get done this year. We'll just continue. But Natalie, is there anything that you think I should add? I think I said enough, maybe. Awesome. Thank you.
Fantastic. So actually, Stephanie, you are the final person to make a presentation today. But before we go, I just want to point out that one of the people attending is Taylor Linnell. And Taylor is the founder and CEO of a for-profit company, so not strictly speaking a member of the NGO and government roundtable, but I'm really happy that you're attending today, partly because of the really important work that your company is doing. Build Cold is focused on ByClean compliance, and the company is all about saving agencies time and minimizing disruption to the construction community while really advancing a focus on embodied carbon reduction and the kinds of policies at state and federal levels both that will help to accelerate that progress. So, Taylor, typically I wouldn't do this, but would you mind just saying a word about what's happening with Build Cold And in the chat window right now, I'm just putting a link to the feature story that you wrote on the CLF website a couple of months ago.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love the opportunity, especially I'm putting you on the spot. But we've been making really good progress on our compliance tool. So just the quick one-liner on Built Cold is that we're building the workflow and compliance tools for agencies at every level of government, from federal, state, and local, to help them create and deploy by clean programs. We start with the federal government supporting the Inflation Reduction Act funds that kind of Brad spoke to earlier. And now we're working much closer with states with public sector mandates and private sector incentives. The big thing coming from us going forward is that we're doing a lot more around bid and project management. And so you're able, as an agency, to deploy a program that can set what materials you want to use, what thresholds, and then we're able to then allow those agencies to run proposals, track those materials. And what's really cool in Colorado is the Buy Clean Colorado sales tax incentive, which is for the private sector. So any builder now in Colorado that wants to build a building, a school, infrastructure project, if they use low carbon materials, qualifying low carbon materials, they get their sales tax exempted, which is 2.9%, which can really start to change the calculation on the green premium and also help lower the cost of construction, which I think is so critical these days. So we're excited to work with more and more agencies and more government entities that want to deploy Buy Clean programs and just maybe don't know where to start. And we work with Building Transparency as well as the Carbon Leadership Forum to kind of give you the trifecta of all the different types of tools and resources you need to kind of build those programs and implement them.
Great. Thank you so much, Taylor. And thank you to everybody who participated this morning, including people that I put on the spot by calling out of the order or out of your set of expectations about what you'd be doing on this call. So Taylor and others, including Luke, you probably resent me bitterly for calling on you without any warning whatsoever. But thanks for talking about MEP 2040. And I'm also particularly excited about MEP 2040, not only because I'm on the steering committee of that initiative as well, and I've been part of it along with Luke over the last, what has it been now? 3 solid years since we had our first kind of tentative meeting to think about MEP 2040. One of the most significant things about the resource paper, the study that Luke mentioned from MEP 2040 is our initial findings are that MEP systems contribution to total life carbon, including both operational carbon and embodied carbon and refrigerant leakage, the impact on the climate from MEP systems in some situations for some projects may be a majority of the lifetime carbon of the project. And that's significant because up until now, there have never been in-depth or substantial analyses of the impact of MEP systems. And so we feel like we're really kind of right on the cusp of change, on the leading edge of being able to understand and then take action to reduce life cycle carbon overall, and MEP systems in particular with our target. So now I'll stop talking about MEP 2040, and thank you all for coming this morning. We'll be sending out an email sometime within the next few days with a link to the video and the contents of the chat window, notes on the meeting, and so on. And thanks a lot. Have a great Friday, and we'll see you all in April. I'll also be sending out an announcement for the April meeting and an invitation for you to register for that meeting in the next few days. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.